In this video, we're going to be taking a look at day 4, associations in categorical data, and talking a little bit about the cooldown called graduate debt. So far in this unit, we've talked about frequency tables and relative frequency tables, and a few different ways that we can make relative frequency tables that help us analyze data in a couple different ways. Now, the reason we want to do this is because we're trying in statistics to find what we call associations. An association between two variables means that the two variables are statistically related to each other. For example, you might expect that ice cream sales would be higher on sunny days than on snowy days. That just makes sense, right? If sales were higher on sunny days than on snowy days, then we would say that there is a possible association between ice cream sales and whether or not it is sunny or snowy. So when we're dealing with categorical variables, row or column relative frequency tables are often used to look for associations in the data. And the reason for that, the relative frequency table, is because just looking at the numbers in this table right here, looking at the raw data, I don't necessarily see any patterns. I'm just seeing some numbers. So what we want to do is we want to take all this data and we want to turn it into a row or column relative frequency table to better compare the categories. So that's what we're doing here. So for the creamery, notice that the number of days with low sales is about the same for the two weather types, which contradicts our intuition. In this case, it makes sense to look at the percentage of days that sold well under each weather condition separately. That is, consider the column relative frequencies. So if you'll notice, what they're doing is they're looking at sunny days and snowy days individually. And what this chart is telling us is that on sunny days, 27% of the time, they sell fewer than 50 cones. But on sunny days, 73% of the time, they sold 50 cones or more. And if we look at this, it looks like there's an association between how much ice cream they sell and what kind of weather it is. We see that we have a lot more cones being sold on sunny days than not, and we see a lot fewer cones being sold on snowy days. Now, from this table, since these percentages are so different from each other, they're not close to being like half and half, it seems like it suggests that there's an association between the weather condition and the number of cone sales. Now, a bakery might wonder if weather conditions impact their muffin sales as well. So this is a relative frequency table for a bakery that sold fewer than 50 muffins on sunny or snowy days, or more than 50 muffins on sunny or snowy days. It seems that there's not an association between weather conditions and muffin sales, since the percentage of days with low sales are very similar under different weather conditions. And the percentages are also close on days when they sold as many muffins. So if you look at this, whether it's a sunny or a snowy day, about 32 to 35% of the time they sold fewer than 50 muffins. What it seems like is there's no causal relationship here. There's no association between these two things. We can't say that the number of muffins being sold necessarily relates to the weather that day, the way that it was with ice cream. I mean, here we can see that 64% of snowy days sold fewer than 50 cones. These numbers are so different that we would say that it seems that there's a link between sunny days and snowy days. Now, let's take a look at the cooldown called graduate debt. This table summarizes data about the median debt for graduating students from a sample of universities in California and New York. So we've got one category of where these universities are, and then we have another category for the amount of debt each has. Is there an association between the state and the amount of median debt for graduates? So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to do either a row or a column frequency table using percentages and do some calculations and see what we come up with. So for example, if I were trying to do a relative frequency table showing median debt less than 9,000 for California versus New York, what I would do is I would take 130, this number right here, and divide it by 202. And then I would take this number, 72, and divide it by 202. 130 divided by 202 is going to be around 65-ish%. I don't actually know. I should have calculated that. That's approximately 65%, but actually do the actual calculation for yourself, because I'm not entirely sure. And then this looks like it's probably going to be around 35-ish% probably. So looking at this, there might be an association between the state and the amount of debt somebody has. 65% of people with debt less than $9,000 went to California universities versus New York universities. What I would suggest then is do the same thing over here. Calculate for this column these percentages here. Or you know what else you could do actually? You could do a row where you look at just California universities or just New York universities. And the way that we could do that, let's see, our total for California in students is 575. So if I was doing a row frequency table, I would take 130 divided by 575. And let me see, 13 times 4 would be 52. It's like 53-ish%, I think. Which means that this over here, that's not a right number, 53. It's more like 20%, because it's 1/5-ish. And so that means that 80% over here. So here's another interesting piece of information. It shows us that for California universities, our median debt less than $9,000, only 20% of students versus 80% that had more than that. If you do the same thing for New York, you might start to see some patterns. Try it out. If you do a column frequency table and you're not seeing a pattern, try doing a row frequency table and see if a pattern emerges. If you have any questions, let me know.